It's setting up to go live. All. Any that Debbie clicked, got it.
Yep, nice job. It's live streaming on my end.
Okay. Cheers.
Yeah.
Oh, we're good.
Okay, we're gonna call to order the meeting for August 7th of the City of Lake Stevens Planning Commission. But before we do, we have some city business to transact.
All right, I think that might be my cue. So hello, I'm Kelly Chellin, I'm the city clerk here on behalf of Mayor Gailey, and gonna swear in tonight Nathan Packard, your new planning commission member. So Nathan, I'll go slow here since we're virtual. If you could raise your right hand and repeat after me. So I state your name.
I, Nathan Packard,
Do solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear or affirm
that I will support the Constitution
that I will support the Constitution
and laws of the United States
and laws of the United States,
and the Constitution and laws of the state of Washington,
Constitution and laws of the state of Washington,
and the laws and ordinances of the city of Lake Stevens,
and laws and ordinances of the city of Lake Stevens,
and that I will faithfully and impartially
and I will faithfully and impartially
perform and discharge
perform and discharge
the duties of Planning Commission member
the duties of a planning commission member
according to the law and to the best of my ability.
according to the law and the best of my ability.
Congratulations. You are official. Thanks, Nathan. I'll let you guys get back to your meeting. Welcome.
And with that, we'll officially call the August 7th meeting of the City of Lake Stevens Planning Commission to order. Let's do the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we'll do the roll call. Commissioner Huxford,
Not yet.
are you out there? Okay. Commissioner Holt?
Here.
Commissioner Morton?
Here.
Commissioner Packard?
Here.
Okay. And we do request an excused absence for Commissioner Jennifer Davis and Commissioner Connor Davis. They indicated to me earlier that they would not be here tonight. Is there a second? All those in favor? Aye, so moved. And then should we give Commissioner Huxford a moment to log in? I hear she's trying to make her way online.
With the commission's approval, I would like to introduce to you Christy Schmidt. You've probably met her before, but she has taken on the role of planning manager recently. So second week, I believe.
Second week.
First back from vacation. So we're excited to have her move up into this new role and help keep our mission moving forwards.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Glad to have the opportunity.
And with that, we'll move on to item 3, guest business. Was there any guest business to transact tonight? See no one in the audience? Anyone online?
No.
Okay, moving on then to item 4, action items, minutes for June 5th. And I saw that it was requested that we defer that to our next meeting. Okay. Do we need an action on the deferral? I don't
No.
think so. Okay. Which brings us then to item 5, discussion items. Item A, 2024 comprehensive plan. Director Wright.
Great. Thank you so much. So I'll start by saying we had intended to have one other item tonight for you, but unfortunately our entire network crashed last week. So we have had very limited access to our files. So thankfully was able to retrieve enough material from emails and other sources to have a packet ready for you tonight. And then as we move into your next meetings, we'll have some additional follow up with the code cleanup project and some others, and we can talk about those later. But I had intended to introduce the 2024 comprehensive plan packet to you, just so you know what we've been doing over the last few months. For the benefit of the newer planning commissioners, we update our comprehensive plans on a regular cycle. It's ranged between 7, 8, and now it's 10 years that the legislature has changed it pretty frequently. So right now we're on a 10-year cycle. And that's actually, it'll be 9 years since the last update, but after that, it'll go on a 10-year cycle. So it's the major update. So what that means is we need to go into each element of our comprehensive plan and make sure that it aligns with the goals and policies of changes to state law, any changes to vision documents from the Puget Sound Regional Council, and that we've incorporated any changes from the countywide planning policies. So that's what we're going to be doing. It's a more intensive project different than your annual updates, which are really usually targeted towards zoning, capital projects, things like that. This is a complete deep dive into each chapter again to make sure that the goals and policies are still up to date. I would say, though, we've gone through an initial audit. So that's the first thing you do. There are checklists that are prepared by the Department of Commerce and Puget Sound Regional Council. And so we have gone through and done our initial audit. And in general, our comp plan looks pretty good. We do need to, again, go in and do a light refresh, and we'll continue to work through that. So the biggest thing for the Planning Commission becomes your role with public engagement. So you'll see in the staff report that we put a public engagement plan together, and we'll have some specific touch points that will go out to the community. The first one of those is the survey that we launched at the same time as Aquafest. So if you haven't had an opportunity to take that survey, I would encourage you to do that and share that link. What we tried to do is we really asked the same questions that we asked in 2015. They've been updated a little bit as it refers to different sections of the city, but in general, the questions parallel what we had asked before. So we can try to look at trends over time. You know, if I'm still here in another 10 years, we can go through the same questions and see again if there are any trends over history. And then there are new questions that relate specifically to transportation needs, which becomes another big portion of our comp plan update. So at this point, just want to open it up to the commission. This is a pretty high level overview just to see if you have any questions about the process or any thoughts on what you've seen to date with the material in your packet.
Janice is in. Hello, Janice.
Hello. Sorry, my apologies.
Were there questions from the commission for Director Wright?
I went through the materials and it was very clear. That's a step-by-step process, and it's going to take a year. So I think it's logical and makes sense. So I had no comments or criticisms.
Okay, appreciate that.
I did have one question. It seems that, I see early communications, a lot of it surrounds social media, which is great because there's a very active social media presence outside the city, about the city. And I was curious if there's going to be efforts to engage those groups as opposed to just blasting out from the city's official Twitter or Facebook or whatnot feed.
Yes, so the public engagement, we will use the common tools that we have for social media. So the more generalized Facebook posts, X posts, and then we will also do targeted open houses where we're reaching out to our service clubs. We'll work with the Citizens Advisory Committee to the mayor. We'll probably engage the Youth Advisory Commission. Most likely, we will also take a trip to the park board. But we will try to engage like the chamber and all of the social clubs as well to get a broad understanding.
But in those efforts, I think what I'm kind of looking for is a means to engage the non-city web presence. So there are pages on, say, Facebook or X now that are specifically run by non-city personnel that have pretty substantial followings and pretty substantial interest when it comes to matters of planning. And it just doesn't seem like there's really a hookup between at times, doesn't seem like there's a hookup between official city news blasts and what's going on in those spaces, unless somebody happens to pick it up and rebroadcasts it.
That's something I will have to look at. Typically, we just try to engage with our community, and I'm self-admitted, and everybody knows this, I don't really follow social media and other things because I like to stick to what I know is factual. I will sort of put it that way and not try to get drawn into black holes, but we can try to make sure we are engaging people and putting effort forward to have public facing documents.
Other comments?
Janice?
If I may, and again, I apologize. I'm once again down at my parents' house this week. I had a couple thoughts and it came up again when Director Wright was talking. When it comes to the social clubs, they do a great job in inviting their members. But if those social clubs would be willing to open it up to, their friends and neighbors to make it more of an open house flavor, I think that would be really beneficial because I am not a member of Rotary, for example, but Christine Eaglestad just joined, and she would be someone that I would think would want to make sure that I knew, if I didn't already know, that this was going on. So perhaps we could ask them not only to host, but to host from outside their membership. And then the second thought was we used to have dialogues within some of the, like the Assembly of God and through Russ Larson there and some of the religious organizations, they would hold a public forum and open it up for their membership and community. And I always thought that was super beneficial.
Okay, thank you.
Any other thoughts on this topic before we move on? Seeing none, that brings us to item 5B, 91st Streetscape Revitalization.
Okay, I'm going to walk through a PowerPoint presentation for you on this project. This is kind of an exciting project. It would be one of the implementation projects from the Lake Stevens Center Subarea Plan. So going back to 2012, lessons learned from our downtown plan, and probably 20th that you need to start doing civic improvements to ensure success for those sub-area plans. So we're moving backwards towards the center of the city, and we've done some improvements with some of the new interchanges, obviously with the state, and we had started a couple of improvements before that, but this would be the largest city-driven improvement to help revitalize the streetscape along 91st, and it's broken into two segments. So there is the commercial segment that would be south of 204, and then there's what we're calling the residential section, which is north of 204. That's kind of a misnomer, though. It's actually going to be more of a mixed use on the east side of the road. It's still zoned commercial. On the west side, as you get closer down towards Vernon, there's commercial pockets. It's really when you get a little further north on Frontier Circle that it's that really intense residential development. So anyway, there would be two road sections, though, that we would be looking at. And if you haven't taken the survey, I thought we could walk through the survey tonight as we did went through the slideshow. Find my way back. Okay, so again, this is our 91st revitalization project, and we'll just walk through the slides. So this is, as I mentioned earlier, this is one of the implementing projects from our Lake Stevens Center subarea plan. This slide with the boxed area in the middle, that would be the length of the corridor. We had initially identified this in our subarea plan as having some retail hubs on both the north and the south. And we are starting to see that come to fruition and want to continue to build on that. So these are some of the project goals: to create an inviting Main Street shopping district along 91st that connects the retail core with surrounding residential areas. We want to develop a more pedestrian-oriented streetscape with specific types of amenities that could include wider sidewalks, bicycle lanes, park benches, things like that, public art. We want to be able to accommodate pedestrians, cyclists, and all types of multimodal travel through this corridor. And then incorporate low impact design if we can for the stormwater runoff, maybe using the landscape areas for that function as well. Again, for those of you who have not taken the survey, if you want to do that as we walk through this, you're welcome to. The project website is here. Otherwise, you can return to it later. This will just give you a better flavor for the choices you'll be making. Okay, so as we look at the existing conditions, so our consultant looked at the areas, broke it into several segments. So starting at Marketplace and then moving to the north. So what we see is we know that there needs to be some right-of-way acquisition taking place. There are a lot of irregular drive cuts. The right-of-way is really choppy along this entire corridor. And they've actually shown what the road section looks like currently, which would include the parking lot on the east side, an existing landscape area, and then it goes into the right of way with a different width of sidewalk and a travel lane, 2 travel lanes and a center turn lane. As we move forward in the next corridor, the frontage pattern stays pretty similar, but you don't have any sidewalk at this point on the western side, or broken sidewalks where all of the older businesses are along that frontage. And then as you move up to the intersection, there's been some redevelopment up on the northwest corner of this corridor. And then as you cross over to Vernon, with the highway project, there has been some new sidewalk constructed. And as you move up Frontier Circle, there is some sidewalk, and in this section, though, there is no sidewalk, and you have a parking lane along the residential side. So lots of differences along this section, and we would like to improve it again for the variety of reasons that we talked about earlier. So as you go through the survey, there will be a series of questions that ask you about the existing conditions. And that's why we included these slides, just to kind of show you that the biggest takeaway is there's not a consistent street pattern, either in terms of sidewalks, landscaping, parking, etc. So what we've done, and we started this project earlier in the year working with the city council, getting some input from them that we then shared with our consultants who have provided these 2 sections for each portion of the corridor. So we'll start looking at the commercial section. So this is option 1A. This would be the first option. The biggest difference is this one has on-street bike lanes, and you preserve your travel lanes and your center turn lane, and then you build consistent sidewalk on each side. And on the west side in particular, as the west side becomes that more pedestrian retail facing Main Street section, because on the east side, you predominantly have the large parking lots for the what we would call a junior anchor, a larger retail store. So there's more possibility to redevelop on the west side and build out those amenities for, that kind of more boutique shopping experience. Section 1B, very similar, but what it does, it keeps a parking lane on the east side, or excuse me, on the west side of the road. And then you would have mirrored planter areas on both sides. And then you would do, instead of bike lanes on the street, you would do a shared bike and parking, shared bike and walking lane on the east side of that corridor. So again, the biggest changes are where your bike lanes are. So just going over those again and offering some pros and cons for the first section, the option A, you have buffered sidewalks along both lengths of the corridor. You'd have new pedestrian lighting, public amenities, seating, public art, the designated bike lanes on the road. And then both options, they seek to retain the large trees that are on the east side. The con would be that the bike lanes aren't buffered from traffic, so they are part of that. And the sidewalks would be somewhat narrower to accomplish that dedicated bike lane. If you look at the option B, you have, again, sidewalks on both sides, so that stays consistent. All of the pedestrian amenities are consistent, but then you have the multi-use path instead of distinct separation of bikes and pedestrian traffic. And other than that, they're very similar. The cons would be cyclists are limited to one directional travel to be protected in that multi-use path. And it would be the most expensive option due to the requirement of right-of-way acquisition.
You're gonna get how much more expensive?
Uh,
10%, 50%?
We don't have the numbers yet, but that would be sort of the next phase of this project, is to get that cost analysis. But if I had to guess, I would probably say it would be 20%, 25%.
Yeah, or is it even possible? You're almost doubling the width of the right of way, at least for the middle of that corridor, going from 40 to 72 feet. So I'm just wondering if that's even feasible. Are you going to be running into buildings and cutting into people's parking or businesses' parking lots and like that? And the other, I prefer A versus B, and my main concern with B is that we're adding this parking lane, and I don't think it's really necessary. There's no parking on the street right now, and I don't think, I mean, most of or if not all the businesses there already have their own parking available. So unless I guess the intent is that over time, we want to move to the type where the businesses are right up at the street, and or
That is part of the vision. So you're correct that there are trade-offs. So putting the path on the one side, and so that's why a lot of the change focuses more towards the west side, because those are, I would say, are the oldest businesses at this point, and probably a lot of those buildings are at the end of their lifespan. And so when they redevelop, what does that streetscape look like versus on the east side, you have the large parking lots already. I have done sort of a high level inventory of the parking, and what I've seen using just aerial photography going back through the years, I've never seen a data point where that parking lot is full. So if you push some amenities to the east and the sidewalk and the lane, you don't necessarily impact the parking. But if the predominant retail pattern in the future does become more street oriented, that was the goal. With then do we subsidize the lack of availability of parking on the lots with providing some on-street parking, again, more like a second main street is the concept. But either way, there are trade-offs. Any other thoughts from the rest of the commission on this section before we move on to the next one? Ms. Huxford?
Thank you so much. This actually takes me back, and you said 2012, which it could have been when you and I were talking about Mill Creek and Bill Trigg's original design of how they did Main Street Mill Creek. And the idea being, obviously, we can't curve this road and make it all, because we're not building it new. But if they were to go back in time, knowing that there's going to be electronic bicycles and scooters, I know that they would keep the bicycle lanes separate from people walking. Knowing that if there is a small person on a bike, they're going to be with a parent or guardian anyway on a sidewalk. But for the safety of all the people that are using the walkways, they would want to separate that. So just a thought. I like A, but that is just my personal opinion.
That's a really good point to bring up the e-bikes. If you take the survey, make sure you please incorporate those into the comment section.
I will do.
It's not just e-bikes, it's also like one wheels and segways, and
Mhm.
I'm seeing a lot of that too, and weaving in and out of pedestrians is disconcerting when they're doing those.
Is there a tweener option? I mean, do you need the bike path on both sides? Can you do option A, but still incorporate one of those bike paths into some more other sort of useful space?
There's definitely a possibility of a hybrid option. The big thing is, as we do our planning function anymore, we always have to consider multimodal as part of every road system now. What that ultimately looks like can vary. So yeah, absolutely. I fully expect that there will be, the preferred alternative will be some sort of a hybrid alternative. Okay. So as we move north, again, looking at two different sections, section 2A, again, very similar to 1A, that you have separated bike lanes. What this one also includes is a parking lane on the west side. There already is a parking lane and it's used pretty heavily. And then you see the sidewalks here butted directly up to the roadway. What this option really doesn't do is look at right-of-way acquisition. They just worked within a 50-foot sort of right-of-way, which is the existing right-of-way. So again, there is an opportunity that this could be wider to put in some buffers or some sort of a hybrid option as we move forward. Option B, you have what's called a sharrow. So it becomes a wider travel lane. Instead of an 11-foot lane, you end up with something more like a 14-foot lane where there's no distinction between the bike lane and the travel lane. You see these a lot in Seattle. You see them actually a lot all over the Sound and more compact roadways. And this option then would eliminate the parking lane on the street. It would increase the planter areas, which has been part of the original sub-area design. Actually, it used street tree wells, which is probably the application we would use again, and then your separated sidewalks.
So, as much as I like the trees idea, having driven over there, there's quite a need for parking. As you mentioned, those spaces along the street are pretty full quite often. And without acquiring more right of way, I don't see how you can add those trees, unfortunately.
Yep. And there is something unique on this particular roadway. On the east side of the road, when one of the older plats was developed, they withheld about a 15-foot tract that abuts the street for open space, landscaping. So there is an underused tract that probably could be acquired more easily than taking over a tract or a portion of someone's property that's used for their business purposes. So I think the right-of-way acquisition, if we need to do that on the northern section, becomes somewhat easier than we'll be looking at on the southern section.
So a hybrid option may be an option on this one as well.
Absolutely. Pros and cons, both new sidewalks on both sides of the corridor. You have designated bike lanes on the one, shared bike lanes on the other, and then they would have the general type of street amenities. Cons on the first option, again, the bike lanes aren't necessarily buffered from the traffic. Again, there are some options that we can do to create that separation. Rumble strips, you can change the asphalt color, the striping. So there are some ways to mitigate that if that becomes a preferred option. And then the lack of the street trees, and that really doesn't follow our beautification standards or the goals of our initial sub-area plan. The cons on the other one is, the cyclists are with the traffic, and then the lack of the street parking. Any thoughts on this northern section?
Yeah, so can you help me with, I'll just say why we're developing this area at all? Meaning, I understand there's a plan to get sidewalks running from Market down to the elementary schools, for example, right? LSMS so that's already covered and taken care of, and this is a totally separate plan. It just seems like there's a lot more residential stuff south of Market than there is in this, 1, 2, 3 blocks here, not that much residential. How much value do we get in terms of connecting the community to the shopping area you can really only access it from those 2 or 3 side roads?
So definitely separate projects. So the first project that you're talking about south of Market, doing the school connections, that's also been a project from the sub area, and that is to connect the neighborhoods and the schools. And so our public works team is definitely moving forward. This one goes into the economic development realm that's also equally as important to the city, that we want these businesses to succeed and thrive and sort of create this new gateway area into the community that's lacking. So the purpose for the improvements are a little bit different. And then as you get north of 204, there's a larger area that looks fairly industrial right off of 91st and Vernon. And that area will be redeveloped in the future and becomes another part of our economic hub. So then we also have Frontier Heights Park that's just a little northwest of there, that we're also trying to create that synergy between public spaces. So the purpose of these improvements would be different than the ones to the south.
Yeah, I guess, but towards that economic development, right? All of those people that live between Market and the middle school, for example, if they had this type of walkway and pathways, right, as opposed to just the sidewalks to get them to school.
And that is the goal, that south of there, the standard road section does have a sidewalk, a bike lane.
Okay, so
landscape
it will be
strips.
similar to this type of plan. Okay, sounds great.
And this just would add more bells and whistles, we'll say.
Yeah, and I'm totally comfortable with the Market to 204 Vernon, right? Like that makes a lot of sense. It's the north section that I'm just struggling with a little bit, and maybe it's just me. I've never driven north of Vernon, right? I've gone to IHOP, but I've not gone up into those neighborhoods at all. And so I didn't even know there were homes up there, but.
And then it actually connects over to Lundin.
Oh, it does connect up there.
Yeah, houses up there.
So I had a question, and maybe it's part of another slide, but one of the things that I'm noticing here is we're treating these two areas different, right?
Yes.
And the intersection of 204 and 91st, even before this, even before the new roundabouts and all that, and even with the roundabouts, is still kind of a headache.
Yep.
And if one was to go with, say, option A on the north side and option B on the other side, those two alignments wouldn't sync up, or not perfectly in terms of where the bike lanes are and all that. Is there a function in here somehow to take a look at that intersection as well, so that the whole thing is treated as one large project instead of two distinctly different ones? And also improvements at that light, because that light is really awful.
So right now, that's a little outside of the scope. We recognize that creates the big disconnect, is why we are handling those two projects, because that becomes a WashDOT Department of Transportation intersection. And when they did the recent project, it wasn't deemed necessary as part of the whole suite of improvements that were done. Because it was still functioning, the light, and then going into the roundabouts, and then they did the dog bone on the other side to create those transitions. But I recognize from just a observational point of view that it doesn't necessarily look like they will be cohesive. And that's why we are treating them a little bit differently. And it is actually at that the dog bone that it really changes dramatically to the road section. But yes, I've heard other comments, and some of the comments that have come in already on the public survey have made note of that. And what's been the big issue for us has always been sort of the grade change between those two sections. So if that's something council ultimately wants included when we go to a full design, then yes, but right now we're just trying to determine an appropriate road profile and start working towards that.
Yeah, one more comment. Yeah, at some point, we're gonna be faced with pricing this out, and there's gonna be a point at which we'll need to prioritize which elements are more important than others, because there's a difference between what we want and what we can afford. I would think the top on that prioritization would be sidewalks. And to make sure we have good sidewalks, that's what everyone, the public, has been clamoring for decades. And so, and also I would think also near the top would be the good street lighting for safety reasons. So that's all.
Okay, appreciate that.
Janice, did you have a comment?
Yeah, but I'll wait until the next slide.
Last slide.
Then I'll go. I think my concerns, other than electronic equipment that's going to be alongside pedestrians, are the pedestrians themselves. And I have a lot of trucks that are going through our new roundabouts. They love them, by the way. So the report back from our drivers is that makes it super, well, much easier to get in and out of our city. Great job, except when there's a pedestrian. And if there is a pedestrian at any of those points, the wheels come off the train. So anything I guess, and I'll put this in my survey, but anything that we can do to actually vary from what was just said, to keep some continuity. So even though you're going through a roundabout that's configured differently, there's still the same entrance and exit for anybody that is walking, and set that precedent now, or at least now moving forward. I think it's going to be helpful. I'm just worried that there's going to be something bad that's going to happen in one of these roundabouts when it comes to a pedestrian at some point.
Oh, certainly they'll be linked up, and they
Yeah.
will make sense however the transitions go. Yes.
But if we are now going to focus on that side of Highway 9, they're going to want to go to the other side of Highway 9. And so this corridor needs help, and I fully support that it needs help. But now you've got people that are going to want to get over to TJ Maxx or whatever, whatever. And so you've got this more pedestrian friendly area, but it's not going to keep them from wanting to be on the other side of 9, which puts them right in the center of these roundabouts that are confusing people quite a bit.
Very good. Thank you. Are there any other thoughts on this project tonight?
Okay. Thank you for that.
Right.
Which brings us on to item number 6, Commissioner's Report. This is an opportunity to talk about items that pertain to the business of the Planning Commission. We'll start with Commissioner Packard at the end.
Nothing from me today.
What I've been noticing a lot lately is seeing a lot of dead animals on the road in my students. One unusual thing is to one to 4 or 5 like dead animals, and I don't understand. People like just running over them. I mean, I'm talking money and. Squirrels and mice and birds and stuff, and it's like every day I'm seeing between 1 and 5 dead animals on Earth. And I don't understand, people are not paying attention, but they're just putting them over. I think that's very nice. I don't know why it's happening. That's lately, it just seems to be more. And then, the other thing, is I've been noticing there's an awful lot more homeless and drug people around. Not so much maybe in the cities, but all in effort. And I don't understand why our community, and our state doesn't have more help for these people. Cause like, for example, you guys all know I'm there. Okay, I never see drugs. We've got all these wonderful, companies and like the government have all these things. But I just, it's really sad to be down in Everett and it's just, I don't understand why our government is allowing this to happen. That's not so bad here in New Zealand. Every once in a while you see some guy trying to get food or whatever. But in Everett, Seattle, Redwood, it's amazing how all these people that are getting the thing that they need to maybe, get food and have the same place to live.
Well, one comment on that, the homelessness, that's a very complicated issue, and it's like, I don't think there's any single solution to that. There's not to, well, we can talk more about it later.
Yeah.
But no, I don't have any other items to bring up. Thanks.
Commissioner Huxford?
Other than welcoming our new commissioner, I have nothing to report on this time.
And from my end, I just wanted to say welcome, Commissioner Packard. You're joining us at a very busy time and we're happy to have you on board.
Great, thank you.
Which brings us to item 7, Planning Director's Report for future agenda items.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to give you just a brief update of what we're going to be looking towards for the next couple of months. So in your second meeting in August and into September, we will hope to bring back the code cleanup project. It's a lot of information there, so I want to make sure you have plenty of time to digest that before we go to hearing on that. 2024 comp plan progress will continue to bring you updates as they happen. They may just be short briefings and probably do that again in September. And then you will also have your public hearing for the 2023 comprehensive plan docket in September, and then that would move on to the city council in October for action.
And so our next meeting will be. What day what? 24th? August 24th?
21st. And then after that would be September 6th. So that would be a Wednesday. So, yep, one more Monday and then back to Wednesdays.
August 21st. Perfect.
Okay.
I'll make sure I have all the calendar.
Great.
And Director Wright, did you have anything else?
No, I don't. Thanks.
Which brings us then to item 8, move to adjourn. Do I hear a motion? All in favor? Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.